I had a third grade teacher that would tell stories to the class. I just remember this part of the story where there was this tiny little creature with a deer head and, a little man's body running through the woods, and the woods were very straight like a Kurosawa, and it was like the angle was from above. It's funny, I've never created the image in a movie, which is part of my folly, because that haunted me. And then the teacher said, and it went, Wendigo, and it really freaked me out. I don't know what. And years later, I made habit. I went to Hollywood and I was trying to pitch a movie. I went home in a huff and thought, well, they want a horror movie, so I'll write something about my childhood, and I'll write about the Wendigo. The movie itself is a series of events that happened to me. We got into a car accident, and we slipped backwards into an icy ditch when we were visiting some people in Vermont. Well, after I made the movie, I actually thought I should research the Wendigo and see what it's all about, because I also had this childhood image of this little book, which was basically the Blackwood narrative in a book called Scary Stories to Tell to Children or whatever. And it had the feet going, and then they stop, and that's because he's carried away by the creatures. The themes of the Wendigo from the actual Ojibwe mythology are about overreach and a world out of balance. And then the greater resonance of the mythology speaks to my own concerns about, environmental collapse. It's a very subjective story about the child's point of view, and when he feels that his parents are threatened, his world unravels. It's really a movie about learning that the world is a scary place. And that's why there's long passages where he's just afraid of the dark. The actual Wendigo, I labored quite a bit to make a deer monster. And everybody, when I was making it, said, well, how could a deer be scary? And I'm like, hey, I don't know if it's scary, but it would be pretty weird to see a guy with a deer head running around in the woods. So that was the thing. My approach to horror has never been about abject fear. It's about weirdness and experience and not knowing what you're seeing is real. The other thing is I tried to design a creature that was made of branches, like as if you would look at a tree and you'd almost see a creature in the tree. So the problem with that film has always been I wasn't quite able to achieve some of the visuals that I wanted. I didn't like the suit that they eventually came up with. I had been away from it for a while, and then they arrived on set, and it had changed from what I had loved. It was a very sinewy rubber suit, and then they put a lot of fur on it, and it was just a miscommunication. And so now it looks like a big bear, which might have been a fine monster in a movie, but it's so not what I wanted that I was discouraged and never recovered. Then I reshot it, I tore all the fur off, but now it really looks weird. Honestly, the beauty is that it all works because it's from the child's imagination, so it's kind of a combination of puppets and nightmare images. It almost works. I don't disown the whole thing, but it is just kind of a shit show of trying to find this thing, this essence, which I couldn't quite get. And that's more where the Wendigo is kind of a savior, a nature spirit that this kid, he finds to be a protector. And, part of me feels that monsters are a way to project what we want in the world or what we're afraid of. And then in this treatment of the Wendigo, it's kind of like a confidant, and, only the kid can see it. I mean, we have to fucking endure so much superhero crap. I would like to see a superhero kind of deer monster who comes to your aid when you're stuck in the woods, or when, in the case of that story, when the local factory is polluting the land. I don't know where it fits in anymore, but I think that would be very wholesome for the children. I've read some stuff in which it says that the white man is the Wendigo, because this idea of the Wendigo, endlessly rapacious, endlessly hungry, endlessly greedy, causing harm in the simplest way, cannibalism, but cannibalizing our entire ecosystem and way of life. It's a cautionary tale about greed, is sort of the essence of this creature. You'll never be satiated, so of course it's advising you to figure out how to be satiated, by more humble aspirations. The other thing that's weird about The Last Winter is I proposed perhaps sort of a ghost herd, and all these other specters, for whatever reason, they're all got antlers. This is just my own fetish, but it makes sense, of course. They're beautiful caribou up there, and they're very much part of that land in northern Alaska. The thing I love about Last Winter is that we propose that oil is the ghosts of former creatures. Oil is crushed organic matter, of which there could be dinosaurs and whatever else, and it's been crushed into a tar, and that's what we're pulling out and refining and burning. So that kind of weird reality of what we do to power our lights seemed to me to be a really strange ghost story.
Shouldn't be here. We're grave robbers. It's coming up from the ground.
Simply, the guy goes out into the wilderness, and when they come to look for him, his footsteps in the snow, and they just end. And then they find him, 2 miles away after looking for him. That's all sort of happens in the Blackwood story. Later on, there's a plane crash, and the one guy's feet catches on fire, and he's running, and anybody who's read the story knows the great central image is the sound of like, oh, my feet of fire. Now, with a little more awareness of the atmosphere that Blackwood creates, I was hoping to have a sense of just unknowableness, that weird thing where we can't quite comprehend what's happening in nature.
I can't tell if this is happening.
Go back to bed.
Ron Perlman mentioned me to Mick Garris. They gave me a call and said, do you want to be part of the new Masters of Horror series called Fear Itself? And they said, well, actually, we already have a script, and we wonder if you'll consider doing this. And I said, well, let me see what it is. And it was a Wendigo story. What I loved about this script is that it was more about the original mythology, which is just somebody gets trapped up in the mountains in a snowstorm. They're forced to eat their fellow travelers, and they come back changed. What the writers, Drew McWeeny and Scott Swan, had done is made the Wendigo about rage. What's really driving him is a sort of a vengeful rage against his wife and brother who have hooked up. It's not a man with a deer head, it's actually just a starving, demonic character. And I was faced with the creature design. I thought of Doug Jones, and it was just one of my greatest ideas I've ever had. And I told the producers, I said, we don't need any special effects. I've got the ultimate special effect. And Doug came up and he just gave this riveting performance. It's one of my favorite Wendigos, of all my Wendigos. I got a call from a UK video game company, and they wanted to talk to me about it. Well, I thought, well, this is very odd because I'm hardly known as a gamer, and it became clear that they had incorporated the Wendigo into their storyline. Well, I immediately called Graham Resnick, who's a Glass Eye regular, and I said, Graham, do you want to come on board with me? Because I can't handle this alone. I really don't know enough about gaming, but he does. But there again, I found myself writing the old Wendigo, it'll grow tall as the trees and all the usual stuff.
This mountain belongs to the Wendigo.
Well, in that one, they're like little skinny, like zombie creatures. And it's very tragic, and it is from a cannibalistic experience. I was very pleased that there's a richness to it, not expected from a video game. I found my third grade teacher years later, and I asked him, so what was that story? And was it just a Blackwood riff you were doing, or was it something else? How was it a deer man? What does that have to do with anything? And he said, I don't know what you're talking about. No memory at all of telling the story in any way.